Why do you think now is the perfect time? Why not only your project is happening, but many, many others as well?
I think it's a move of God. I think Hollywood is in this transition.
Nobody knows how to make this film. The guy that's financing the whole thing from his own pocketbook, and it ended up being $20 million, by the way. We were months into it, and I'm like, John, has Matt seen any of this? And he's like, no, we think we're gonna wait another 6 months. And I was like, what? One, that never happens. I've never, even at a big at Disney or whatever, you name it.
Looking at your history, it's like watching myself grow up. Mulan to Beauty and the Beast to even part of VeggieTales and things like that.
You left out Lion King. And Pocahontas. I started realizing, like, no, wait, this is a good thing.
Absolutely.
This is a movement, and this is God's plan, and it became obvious.
It was the first time I had heard anything about God. And from that moment, I was just fascinated with movies. He goes, are you a Christian? And I said, yes. He said, I've always wanted to talk to one of you. Quit telling everyone that the world censors Christian content. We don't buy your content because it looks so cheap. Make something good and worthy, and then you quit making excuses that we're censoring you. That pierced right through here.
You guys are for sure not newbies. You're not green to this game of creativity and making things. For my audience who's not really in the animation world, would you give us kind of an idea of who you guys are, where you came from, how you grew up in creativity here?
Go ahead.
So, well, you want us to go with names and everything?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm John Schafer. I started really, I've been producing for 33 years, and 15 of that was working on Superbook. It was a reimagination of what was released in the 80s. And so that's how I met Tom, reached out to Tom, and he worked on the pilot episode. But I would say it's been a childhood dream. You know, since I was young, my mom and dad, I'm going to be 57. So when I say this, like in 1973, the first feature film I'd ever seen in a movie theater was Robin Hood.
Wow.
The Disney Robin Hood. And I just remember how that just really impacted me. And that same year, Charlie Brown Christmas special was on, and we watched it, and it was the first time I had heard anything about God, Savior, and that stuff when Linus shared it to Charlie Brown, what Christmas is all about. And I remember asking my mom and dad about this God and Savior, and they really didn't have an answer for me, because my mom, she was Buddhist. She came from Japan. Wow. My dad was Christian Science. So, years later, I got saved in a Pentecostal church, you know. And so, but it was that it planted a seed in me. And I remember that Christmas, I asked my mom and dad for a nativity.
Wow.
And they did buy me a nativity. And to this day, I still have that nativity. But it was what planted the seed. And on my journey as producing and that stuff, especially with Superbook and animated children's series, I can see the power of animation. I can also see how it's a non-threatening way to share a story, especially about the life of Jesus. And so, you know, leading up to this film here, you know, it's like the biggest dream come true.
Right. Yeah. And what about you?
I'm Tom Bancroft, and I'm also the director in the film. And my background is animation. I've been in the animation industry for 35 years. And was blessed to work at Disney during the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah, looking at your history, it's like watching myself grow up, you know?
Yeah.
I'm thinking from like The Rescuers Down Under to Mulan to Beauty and the Beast to even part of VeggieTales and things like that. And
You left out Lion King.
Yeah.
And Pocahontas. Yeah, so I worked on all those films, but then also did a lot of faith-based animation. So like he was saying, I got to work with CBN on Superbook. I also, before that, had worked on VeggieTales and created the Larry Boy 2D animated adventures. And then now, fast forward a little bit to this film, and it's just been a huge blessing to be able to work with John, one of my best friends, and honestly make a film that we both are so passionate about it. And then on top of that, there was a mandate from the guy that's financing the whole thing from his own pocketbook, Matt McPherson, and he said, and I want it to be 2D.
Right.
And we both have hearts for 2D animation, even though, you know, Superbook was CG and all that, and so is VeggieTales. You know, my background is Disney hand-drawn 2D animation.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this is a really interesting project. So from my side of things, I've been focusing on Christian media for the past 4 years on YouTube. And so this last year, we really decided to kind of change gears and focus specifically on biblical media, which is why Light of the World is so interesting to us. And so this is the project that you're on now, Light of the World, which, as you're saying, is a 2D animated, basically, story of the book of John, right? And so we're seeing the gospel kind of in a new way that we've seen it before. And there's a lot that I want to get into with that for sure. Whenever I was first sent this trailer, I was definitely intrigued because we were kind of talking before this, and I'm a skeptic. I'm like very much like I'm very much a hard-nosed person when it comes to creativity, especially in the Christian space, because I think it's so important that we get it right. And so if it's done poorly, that's one thing. If it's done inaccurately, that's another thing. And so all these things kind of mix up in the things that we've had over the last decade, really, in mainstream, where it's like we've been let down so many times over and over again. And so seeing this trailer and seeing some of the accuracies and some of the new ways that we're looking at things, for example, John's age in this, he's 13. And so this is a really interesting way of looking at it, where most people will put John in his 30s or 40s in a biblical project. And that doesn't really make sense if we're looking at it from a biblical perspective. So looking at this project, I want to ask a few things. First of all, let's start off with why co-directors and what is the pros and cons to that.
So originally it was just me directing. So I had been on the project for about a year, and for Tom and I, Tom has his own company called Pencilish, and they're not a gun for hire animation studio. They literally create their own content in that. And so when I had reached out to Tom and shared what I was working on, I was telling him about an animation test that we really needed and that stuff. And so we were going to build a small team to do this animation test to see if our designs, if they work. Because we fell in love with the designs, but now if they're not animatable, it's useless. And so he did talk to me and says, I showed him the stuff, and he was really impressed with it. And he said, hey, I know we're not a gun for hire, but I'd be interested really to help you guys. He loved the art style and everything. And that was the entry point. So we hired Pencilish. They came in to do the animation test, and it's cool because he brought a lot of animators that I'm very familiar with, the names, and like Todd Bright and all that stuff. And I'm thinking, oh man, they're working on our thing. But what happened after we had done that part of the test and we were done, I really felt like, man, this movie's huge. It's massive. My background's CGI. The methodology is a little different. It's different techniques and things like that. And I just called him before Christmas break and said, hey, I know you're busy and that, but I really would love it if you would consider co-directing. And we don't look at each other as co-directors. We literally, when we tell people, no, he's directing, I'm directing. We don't do that. Okay. So we share the title of directors. But it was really because I had worked with Tom for over a decade. And when you've gone through the trenches and survived in the foxholes with someone, that's who you want to be there with. And this task of telling this story it's immense pressure. It's like there's a weight to telling the story of life of Jesus because it's so personal to so many people. But also at the same time, Tom and I developed the sensibilities. He knows what I really feel like we need to stick to, but also I trust him in, like, he comes from that Disney background. So there's that sense of humor, the sense of, how to entertain and to find that balance together. Because if it was just me, I think everyone would say, man, that's the most biblically accurate movie I'd ever seen. But it wasn't funny. And so
that was a wonderfully animated devotional. Well, and I'll jump in just to say that, obviously it was a dream come true that I never knew I was dreaming, honestly. Because that's the kind of dream that God puts in your heart, and it just sometimes it's like lightning. And it was like that for me. I was like, all of a sudden one of my best friends calls me, says he's making a film about Jesus, and it's 2D. I'm immediately like, do you need any help? And so then he started explaining to me all the things are kind of going off the rails over here, and we're having a struggle here. And really what it was that nobody on the production had made a 2D animated film. And honestly, you don't know until you get into it what that really means. And so me and my producer, Pam, they brought us in, and it was really just they needed a couple dinosaurs to come in and help them like explain what 2D is and what the process is and the pipeline that you need to create and what are the jobs. I mean, literally, we would have whole meetings about definitions, about what does this term mean? What does this term mean? When you say that, what do you really mean? We're like, well, it's like it sounds, and when you explain it, but that the lights went on really fast about like, oh my gosh, wait, nobody knows how to make this film. Right. They honestly do need us. And again, just like John was saying, we already had a built-in trust. We had a love for each other, but also like we knew we weren't gonna like fight and derail this film because of just emotions and things like that, because we could completely trust each other.
Right. Yeah. So behind the film is Salvation Poem Project, which we're not going to get too deep into here, but I want to just hear about the heart behind it in terms of like the investment. Obviously, Matt McPherson, he's a huge benefactor in the back end of he's investing in the project and really making this happen. It's so much different than we've seen from a lot of these other projects where The Chosen started off crowdfunded and now they've got a bunch of different things. They just announced they're going exclusive with Amazon. So like there's a lot of things that are happening with that. House of David is obviously an Amazon show. What does this project look like because you have a single kind of investor, and what does that allow you to do where other projects may have more red tape or bureaucracy or whatever else?
So I would say this is, Matt McPherson, he is the founder of Salvation Poem, and Salvation Poem is based on a 6-line song, and it was the most simplified version of the gospel presentation. So Matt's background is he's the founder of Matthews Archery. It's literally the largest archery company in the world. And McPherson Guitars, which is very high-end premium guitars.
Yeah, that's how I know him, because I was a worship pastor for like 10 years before I did YouTube. So I've always heard about McPherson Guitars and always known the love for them. And so when Brennan reached out to me to watch the trailer, I was like, what? I know this name. Where's this name from?
So the family themselves are artists, whether it's on the music side of things, but also Matt being an engineer designing these bows, the guitars, that there's an artistry that he really loves the craft. And so I would say with what happened is I got to know them because I was working on Superbook, and early on the McPhersons, they gave a considerable donation to CBN for Superbook. And one of the things that we end up using is the song, the Salvation Poem song. And so right when the episode ends, it goes, instead of going to credits, it goes into this minute 30 song, and it's a simple gospel presentation. But we use clips, highlights from that episode because kids like to rewatch things. Right. And so that's what happened there. And that's how I developed the relationship with Matt and Brennan. So, I've worked with him for a while, been at CBN for 23 years, and literally out of nowhere, I got a call from Brennan. And typically when he texts me, he says, hey, can we talk? It's important. Usually someone in our organization overseas may have used the song differently and made it their own version. So they just want to make sure that, and it wasn't that. He called and just said, hey, my dad and I've been talking about you and praying, and we really feel like you're supposed to be a part of Salvation Poem Project.
Wow.
And originally my role was simply going to be, I was going to be the producer, creative producer over the next set of, they called New Believers course. These are like 3-minute animated shorts of just taking high concept ideas and boiling it down so anyone can understand. And because it's so simplified, it's easy to translate. So that was what I was going to do. And I'd only been here for a couple months, and Matt came to Brendan and I says, hey, I want to take you guys out for coffee. And we went out there, and he literally, this is how it went. I really feel like a long time ago that the Lord put on my heart, I'm supposed to make a movie about the life of Jesus. But I never try to make things happen. If that's God, He'll show me when it's going to happen. Right. And he says, John, you're here, and maybe it's supposed to be an animated version. I always thought live action, he said. And so he asked me what would it cost, and I said, well, Matt, you can't do that because you need a script, character counts, locations, all that stuff. He said, oh, no, just tell me a number. And one, I've never worked in 2D. I've worked in CGI. I know that world really well. And so I just, he said, I'm not gonna hold your feet to the fire. And he just wouldn't let go. And I said, it's easily 10 million plus. And he just kind of
Thinking that would sort of scare him off a little bit, right?
I thought that would,
Right.
because when you hear independent films, you always hear people doing it for 3 to 5 minutes.
Right,
So I
right,
thought, you know,
right.
but also I didn't know 2D, so I figured I better round up.
Well, and by the way, that was lowballing.
Yeah, yeah.
So what happened is that was kind of the end of the conversation, you know, and he says, yeah, let's do it. I don't know what that means. Like,
Right.
so a few days later, he came in the office, wanted to see, he asked me and Brendan, hey, what do you guys got going so far on it? And like, I'm not making this up. I literally thought to myself, like, oh, he was serious.
Yeah, yeah.
He's serious. So he talked to us. And what he did is he just sat Brett and I down. He says, I really want to do this. But why do another Jesus film? We have to find why.
Right.
And the first of all, what I want us to do is find, what does Jesus look like? So the task was hire as many artists possible. The only instructions you give them is he has to have kind eyes, a kind face, but he can't be good looking, heroic looking.
Right,
He's got to be
right.
the everyday, you know, the person that you would never imagine. But it has to have kind eyes. He has to have kind eyes. That's what you tell the artist. Don't give them what you think, what you want. Let them now try to figure it out. And it was the first time I was ever given budget to go, you know, contact all these artists and doing all that.
Right.
And so when we did land on that design and showed it to him, he was like, okay, let's move forward. Because he felt like if we could find the right design of Jesus, it could inform what the other characters would look like, what the world would look like. So that was the most,
Right,
and that's when
right.
he's using his engineering side of him.
Right.
And so that's how that really all got started.
And I have to jump in and say that in the 35 years, this is I think, from my perspective, one of the most amazing things about Matt and what he put in front of us, which was, and it ended up being $20 million, by the way.
Yeah.
Here's the $20
Chump
million.
change. Easy.
Yeah, no big deal. And it was enough. But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is he put it in the bank, and one, that never happens.
Right.
I've never, even at Disney or whatever, you name it, it's tranches of money kind of slowly coming out.
Right.
The power you have when that money is in one spot and
Yep.
can be spent the way you need it spent, when you need it spent, it gives you so much more power. Plus, you can make things now cheaper. You can start hiring people to do multiple jobs on a production that usually will get stretched out and they have to get laid off, come back later. They can be, so there's a lot of like financial beneficial sides to that. Most importantly, the amazing thing about Matt was how hands-off he was. He immediately said, these are my goals. I want it to be biblically accurate. I want it to, I want you to see Jesus as a friend. I want you to, there was some, benchmarks. It should be like a storybook so that kids, and that
It feels very much like that. Yeah.
That was one of the big mandates on 2D, of course, which was another amazing one. I was like, I'm in. And then he actually stayed by that. Like anybody that's ever financed anything, for them to not have the ego to say, oh, but I'm a musician, so obviously I'm going to write the music. I'm going to compose that.
Right.
Oh, you wrote that. I have other words I want you to throw in there and use. And I've rewritten the whole thing, to stick by that. And honestly, we were months into it. And I'm like, John, has Matt seen any of this? And he's like, no, we think we're going to wait another 6 months. And I was like, what? By then we're like, we can't turn back,
Yeah.
But they knew, and eventually Brennan, his son, said, who's our executive producer, he said, oh, no, we're going to show him this bit that we had, which was basically the whole film storyboard, our first pass.
Right.
We have to show it to him, and he agreed. And so anyway, we did, and very, very small changes. And then he would just trust us, honestly, to make the movie that as long as it hit those main markers of that it could be used internationally too, was a big one.
That's got to be incredibly rare in a person. Like you have to have,
It is.
in order to have the resource and the lack of ego and the trust in a group of people. That's got to be so rare.
Yeah.
So rare.
I'll say the one thing that we haven't talked about is Brennan, and so the level of trust that Matt has for Brennan, his son, and just like Brennan, man, the guy's a sharp guy. He's not only is he producing this film, but early on it was literally just Brennan and I, and we're trying to crack the story. So it started out with, hey, is it we had so many versions, and where we started really moving to is, why haven't we tell it from John's perspective?
Right.
He's on the island of Patmos. There's these two kids on the island because there's an outpost, it's a Centurion outpost, and that these kids would come and hear the story from John.
But John's a prisoner.
Yeah, prisoner.
Right.
Yeah.
And that stuff. But what happened is one of the Roman officers, it was their children, and so he knew about the story about Jesus and what he did, but he wanted his kids to hear from the man himself.
Wow.
There. So that was the original one.
Right.
And
it wasn't a bad idea.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
actually really good.
And the biggest thing that is like, we'd always have to kind of break that wall going, he'd go back in the story, come back out. And then it felt like, oh, he's giving too much exposition.
Right.
It was very
Right.
Princess Bride kind of a format.
And so really it was this Brent, and that's where he's really sharp. He's really good at that troubleshooting. And I think with my experience with Superbook and seeing how children engage with other children in there. So that one of our best episodes of all time is our pilot episode, A Giant Adventure, with the story of David, story of David and Goliath there. And it's because they related to David, that age and that stuff. And that also David, he's kind of, disdained by his family, plucked out of obscurity,
Right.
and I think they see themselves in that. And so that's where we really gravitated, was this finding, let's make John younger. And then it came into this whole research, like, man, is there any plausibility? And when they started talking about, a lot of the disciples they feel were teenagers. Peter may have been the oldest at 22,
Right.
24. And
Right.
we started kind of back timing. So we publicly just don't tell people John's 13.
Yeah.
But for us, that is a story that he is coming into
Right.
adulthood. He wants to have more responsibilities with his dad's business, fishing and all that stuff. And so that was a hook. We came from that perspective. And so, but, Brennan, it's he's in the background. A lot of people don't realize that, but he was kind of the architect that really kind of got us to where we're at. And so, and also that's why, comes that when Matt trusts Tom and I, because he literally says, I trust you. But it comes down to the fact that Brennan trusts us and we work with him, and we never hid nothing from Brennan. We worked with him about our
Right.
thoughts and all that.
Well, he knew the highs and lows the whole time.
Yeah. But Brennan never, he never micromanaged us on the story and that. He would add things to it, but yeah, that's an experience we will never ever see again. I know for TSP the goal it's a theatrical release, and but it's really to bring awareness about the film.
Right.
Because if a film does really well in the United States, box office reviews or things like that, it opens up more doors internationally. And so that's what our whole purpose really is this theatrical one. It's not for Matt to make his money back, because Matt literally said, my return of investment is as many eyeballs watching this film. And if it makes money, it does not come back to me. It comes back to TSP for more translations, to work on another film, to work on the game Clayfire and all that. So that's the big vision of Salvation Poem Project, is to create content that is high quality, that we can give to ministries around the world. We license it freely. There's no strings attached. There's nothing, that's what the whole vision of us is, our vision.
Wow. I want to get back to that for sure in future projects and what that may look like. But I want to ask a couple of different things in terms of why now? I mean, when I was growing up, we had a few Bible projects, nothing that was like super, super mainstream, other than I think of like Prince of Egypt, right? Which was, for my childhood, was such a big part. Now looking back at it, there may be some biblical issues there, but but we won't nitpick at that.
Yeah. It looked good.
It was great, yeah. But from your perspective, other than the investment and all that stuff, why do you think now is the perfect time? Why not only your project is happening, but many, many others as well?
I think it's a move of God. I truly do. And look at the times we're in. Look at what's going on in the world. And I'm not preaching an end of the world thing. I'm not. But just look what is going on around the world.
I can clickbait that way better though. So can you tell them it's the end of the world, and then I'm just
As we all know, it's the end of the world.
And I really think it's God. I mean, Dallas, when you hear, his story, obviously, and just of something that failed before and then what had happened. And I'm impressed with what he's done with that story, you know, and where he's going with it, and that non-believers watch it, and many people, whether they're a non-believer or a believer, feel like they can relate to one of those characters. And
Absolutely.
so I think it's God, and I think he's releasing all of us to do what we do. And right now, everyone's raised the bar on quality. You know, look what the Irwin brothers have done.
Right.
You know, like when I'll just share an example. Before Superbook was greenlit, the new series, I went to MIP Junior, and that's a big trade show in Cannes, France, where it's an international market. So we went there to kind of survey what's out there, the content and all that, because we weren't sure, do we reimagine Superbook or do we do something different? And, you know, and I just saw the content out there. And this is back in 2004. And it's like, it's nowhere like it is now, but you could start seeing a shift where there's an agenda going on an international side. So when I came back, we really felt like Superbook is what we're supposed to do. We did the pilot episode. So when the pilot was done, we had that to show at the international market. And I'll never forget this. We saw that when you're at the trade show, you find out who the buyers are, where they're from, who's going to talk to you. We had this guy from Germany with one of the largest networks there wanting to meet with us. And so we were excited thinking, and we saw that he watched the entire video because you could see where they checked out at him at. And he came to talk to us at the buyer's lounge, and he just said, hey, we asked him to sit down. He said, oh, I'm not going to sit down. I'll just have a few minutes. He goes, are you a Christian? And I said, yes. He said, I've always wanted to talk to one of you. He said, quit telling everyone that the world censors Christian content. He said, there may be some countries that they can't put any religious stuff on there, especially towards children.
Right.
But we don't buy your content because it looks so cheap. And how can we sell with advertisers? So make something good and worthy.
Right.
And then there'll be advertisers. And then you quit making excuses that we're censoring you.
Right.
That hit me, like that pierced right through here. And I remember that night thinking, at one point, Christians were the influencers. Architect. Paintings. The art, sculptures. What happened? When did that shift take place that we no longer were an influencer?
Right.
And so that one meeting just really changed it for me, you know, and
well, and I'll add to that about, you know, it's been interesting working on this film as we're working on it, and there's no plan. Obviously, God put it on Matt's heart. I want to make this film with you. Then that plan got unraveled to us, and we were like, no, we feel like we're a part of that plan, and that just grew from there. But then as we're making the film, we're seeing, oh, this other film's coming out that's animated. Wait, that's within a year of ours, or that's within only a few months. And, you know, you start targeting where your film's going to land, and we're starting to see it's a bumpy road if you're just looking for like a nice way to enter and make your money and all that. But then we started realizing, like, no, wait, this is a good thing.
Absolutely.
This is a movement, and this is God's plan. And it became obvious, like that thing that was at first like, wait, there's another one, and that comes out in 5 years, or this comes out in 3, and this one, and then on top of that is The Chosen, which is, you know, we jokingly say we're like, you know, chosen for kids.
Now they got it chosen for
But now they did it, but honestly, that all layers together, because I started realizing, well, I guess that makes sense. Like, why wouldn't God just have one movie that would go out there and just change everybody all at once, right? Well, no, God would probably do it the way it's happening, which is this one's going to attack this group over here. This one's going to fight for this group over here. This one's, because they're all different viewpoints, hopefully pointing to the same source. And that's what's kind of exciting about it, is to see that we're all doing it a little bit differently and all that, but hopefully we're all pointing correctly to the right source. And I'm seeing that happen, and that's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, early on, you know, when we were doing our film, you know, definitely knew about Jesus Film, and we actually, you know, talked with Josh Newell, the president of Jesus Film, and we kind of figured out, hey, how can two of these films be coming out that we can help each other, that we're not trying to do what happened with the movie like Deep Impact and Armageddon or Volcano and Dante's Peak. Like, how can we work together to help each other? You know, because at one point our film was coming out Easter of 2025. They were going to come out at Christmas of 2025.
Yep.
So, and obviously production kind of changes a lot of that stuff. So we just really felt like we actually benefited with each other working together and that stuff. And, you know, we see that too with the King of Kings coming out. You know, it's like, yeah, we don't view it as competition at all. We view it like, hey, we can really, there's different styles, a different way of telling the story and that stuff that we're going to complement each other. And that's what the exciting part.
Yeah. What is the future of biblical animation specifically look like, as this year, like we were talking about, you've got these 4 huge projects of Light of the World, King of Kings, The Chosen Adventures, and then the David movie, which is the largest crowdfunded project basically in existence. So like those 4 animated things are like, this is an insane move of things that we haven't really seen before. I was talking about it with a friend of mine in the industry recently. In 2024, we had like, I believe it was a show or a movie or something in theaters every day of the year in 2024 that is a biblical-based or Christian-based thing, which has not been the norm, obviously. And so there's obviously this huge rise that's coming, but particularly in animation, you know, you guys, obviously you're saying you don't see it as competition, you see it as a move or a wave that's kind of rising. What do you see that going in the future, past 2025 and into the future of what these things are? Also, like, how do you see other studios and different things kind of jumping into this? I guess from your perspective, it's interesting to me.
Well, you know, we know how Hollywood works. You know, if any of these make money, but all of them make money, let's put it that way, obviously Hollywood's going to jump on board. And so the future would then be more and more of that. And, you know, and that's a scary thing to think about. There's obviously opportunities to that could be a negative, and that they're not hiring the right people that truly believe in what they're telling, the stories they're telling, and they're just, it's a money grab or whatever. You know, obviously that's a negative viewpoint, and I do hope that would never happen. But you know, I do see that at least the ones that I'm seeing that are coming out. What excites me about it is their quality. I don't see anybody, and the David movie is a really good example of that. It's a beautiful looking film, and I have friends that have worked on that. We know people that worked on King of Kings. We're kind of connected in some way to all of these films, and they got really talented people working on these films, and they're all doing it for the right motivations, and they all believe what they're doing. And so I do think they're going to be successful. I think we're going to see a stream of successful Christian films, and I could see that on the live action side. We're seeing that there already happening with the Irwin brothers and what Dallas is doing. And so we're in a really exciting new wave of people going, you know what, after talking about it for years, these need to get better. We need to do better. We need to have industry people involved. Industry people are involved now, and it's starting to actually happen.
Yeah, like when I saw the trailer for The House of David, oh man.
Oh, right?
It was, there's a part of me inside like, man, I wish I was involved with that, because it is so cool looking. It's just, it's high quality, and you know, I was just blown away. But what I would love to see, and I don't know the reality, because now I think Hollywood is in this transition. I think all the stuff that they were pushing out, we're seeing different shifts of how they're going to tell stories, and so we're starting to see that, because I think it was an interesting time, you know, when all the different movements were going out there, whether it was woke or whatever those terms are, is it wasn't Christians who were not going to the movies. It was a general audience. And so I think, you know, you're watching a lot of these studios, the big turnovers at Disney, everyone's trying to reboot, refigure out. So I think with all this movies coming out, like, if the church gets behind it and all the support for that, for every one of these projects, and it shows that people just want good, you know, it doesn't have to be preachy. Just good storytelling. Good moral.
Honest, I think. Authentic. They want the real story. They don't want a fake Jesus that's like perfectly manicured, and it's got to be something that's real.
And what I would hope what Hollywood do, I would hope this is what would happen. This would be the cool dream, is when Passion of Christ came out, it floored the world. It literally did. The box office numbers, everything. All of a sudden, you got Hollywood start making their type of stuff, you know, their films and that. And it's like the Noah ones, like, oh, that didn't quite work, you know,
Yep.
and that beautifully done,
Right.
beautifully, but it was just out there. And I would hope that if Hollywood sees that there's an audience, that they would come to the content for the storytellers, the
Yeah.
Christian storytellers,
Yeah.
and hey, instead of them trying to figure out how to make a faith-based movie, help support and
Yeah.
build and pay for
Yeah.
one made.
Go to the trusted people in the
Yeah.
space that are ready to do it and wanting to do it, you
And
know?
I would love to see
Yeah.
that happen, you
Yeah.
know, and that.
I think we're seeing some of it, but I think this year is going to tell us a lot, just like you guys are saying. I think if these projects succeed and we see a lot of great things coming from them, then we're going to see even more. It's going to explode. And if these projects fail, we, you know, everything doesn't go well, then we're going to see it diminish. And so it's going to be really interesting. As a final note here, when can we watch Light of the World? What are you expecting from it? And what would you like people to know about the film overall?
So it'll be in theaters September 5th. What's kind of cool about that is that's on my birthday.
Okay,
It wasn't even planned that way. I just got to tell this quick story. It's like, you know, when I was younger, I saw the 1933 King Kong and asked my dad, like, how did they do that? You know, and he took me to a library, got the coffee table book of the making of King Kong. And from that moment, I was just fascinated with movies. And when I was 7, my dad helped me make my first stop motion animated movie. So short, I should say short. And, you know, this September 5th I'll turn 57. So it's 50 years from that time
Wow.
of wanting to, I always tell my mom and dad, I'll be a director. And never became that one. You know, I became a producer, was producing for 33 years because that's what I was really good at. I did direct a lot of hundreds of commercials, but nothing like this. So it just shows, like, you know, 50 years later, on my birthday, this movie's coming out. So it'll be in theaters on September 5th. We are going to have some international launches. They're trying to work with teams right now where that's going to be. Our goal right now, short term, is we're going to submit the film to Annecy for the big animation film festival. And so at the end of March, we'll find out if it gets selected. If it gets selected, Annecy is in June, so that would be the first time, literally, it would be shown at that level of public, and it'd be a completed movie by then. It'd be completed. So, but yeah, theaters right now, and then afterwards, I don't know what the window of time is, but like I said, it will be given to ministries, and they will start using it, whether they put it on broadcast, whether they, you know, use it in their churches, or we're releasing it for the masses that way.
Wow. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Really
Thank you.
appreciate your time.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it.
Yep.